everybody, and welcome back to the ESO headquarters at PAX 2016. We have an encore presentation for you of the Tailored in Tamriel panel with lead figure artist Tatiana Malenko. Today she's going to talk about the parallels between creating costumes in the Elder Scrolls Online via digital media and creating some of these stunning costumes and props like the necklace she's wearing and necklaces and these are gauntlets, yeah? She has here in real life for cosplay. So we'll let you start.
All right. Well, hello, my name is Tatiana Malenko, and I'm a lead figure artist for Elder Scrolls Online. For those of you who don't know, figure art is a group of artists dedicated to creating anything that goes, any characters that you see, whether it's player or NPC, all of the clothing, all the armor, all the weapons, monsters, creatures, pretty much anything that's not a proper environment is done by the figure art team. This particular talk is about costumes. So let's just begin by looking at the guys that create all of these things. So this is our team. As you see, quite a bit of them. So that's starting from left to right, top row, Kevin, another Kevin, then there is Barry, Greg, then there is Khajiit in the middle, I believe. Joe right behind it. Kelly is right next to the costume. The guy with the crazy eyes is Gabe. Next to him is Rico. Right in front of him down there is probably me, I think. And then that's Cody and Pete right in the center. So we're going to start the talk talking about me. Who doesn't like to talk about me? I know I do. So who am I and how did I end up doing what I do? So I grew up actually being involved in theater quite a bit, doing acting and helping with the props and costumes. And the reason I actually started to study art, such as painting, drawing, and eventually sculpture, is because I wanted to become a fashion designer. But then, later I decided that I want to be an opera singer, and later I wanted to be an architect and circus performer at some point. Anyway, I ended up being an artist for video games. But my love for everything really visually interesting, I guess, led me to this field because I feel that it combines a lot of different disciplines in art. So what you see here in this picture, this is in my spare from work time. I actually design original costumes where my sister is a photographer. We actually would pick a location where we want to go and do a photo shoot, and I would design a costume, hair, makeup, stuff like that, just to and express certain an idea. This particular one is just expressing free animal spirit. It was shot in Mexico, in Piedras Encimadas. This dress is red linen featuring some of the authentic Mexican embroidery. So I do a little bit of cosplay as well. I'm a huge fan of Game of Thrones, and as you see here, this is Cersei Lannister costume from season 3. Usually, I prefer to use materials that are as close to those used in the real show as possible. Of course, if I don't have the access to the materials, such as, for example, I don't really work with metals, so I would use Worbla and 3D print for some parts of the costume, but whenever possible, I usually try to recreate the costume as close as possible how the original designer made it. This is another one of the original costumes. This is a mermaid here. And yet another original costume. This was shot in Maine. We specifically designed this costume for the location. This is a really interesting lighthouse on the coast of Maine. And this particular one is a tribute to Slavic mythology. So these are some of the cosplay costumes you may see. one of them is right here next to me. This is Khajiit light armor. I actually made it as a cosplay way before the armor appeared in the game because I had access to the concept art. And, I was wearing it for Halloween, but people outside studio did not actually recognize what it was, which was kind of sad. I haven't worn it ever since. Then another photo right there in the middle, this is Daenerys Targaryen wedding dress from Game of Thrones. And in here, I actually used 100% silk because that's what I believed was used in the show. As I mentioned, I like to recreate it as close as possible, and I hand dyed to a very particular color. And next to it is just a fun costume because I just like Dark Paris, Dark Horse, the music video, just because it's so visually stunning, and I just wanted to do that costume. Now, the first costumes actually that I started to do just for fun were mostly just historical costume recreations. You see one of the older costumes right here. This is, and it's not exactly historically accurate, but sort of in the spirit of a Russian boyarnya dress, 17th century. I was mostly interested in recreating a headdress right here. It's called kokoshnik. I made a couple of these. This is one of the dresses. Now I have developed quite an interest in doing beadwork embroidery. You see in the one of the slides the big yellow necklace, that's bead and gem embroidery. I'm also wearing one of those, and you can see another one on display right there. I actually made quite a few of them because I just like doing that. Some other techniques I used to make props, as I mentioned, is a 3D printing. I have a 3D printer at home, so I would do a digital sculpt of it, and then 3D print it and paint it, apply patina so it would look like the material, like kind of bronze. In this case, this is a Cersei Lannister necklace. I know it does not look exactly like the necklace she wore. That's for a reason, because I actually wanted to make it more like a real lion, because I'm a big cat lady. I like cats, and the one she wore is kind of a cross between human and a lion face. I just went for a more of a liony look. In this same slide, you could actually see me wearing the Russian costume in its full glory. Also, there is a close-up of an embroidery I'm working on right now for Cersei Lannister season 6 costume. It's actually on display right here if you want to come up later. The middle part of it is a 3D print because I just thought, it's the fastest way for me to do it, even though in the show I think it is straight out embroidery, but I wanted to make it a little bit more three-dimensional. Again, it's an opportunity to make yet another lion face. By the way, all of the Khajiits and Senshin game is made by me. No one else is allowed to touch cats or else. So let's move on. So this is a close-up of Cersei Lannister embroidery that I did. I actually did a lot of research on how Michelle Carragher, the original embroiderer for the show, does her work, and I tried to recreate it as close as possible. So this is another one of a little bit earlier costume work that I did just for myself. This is one of my favorite paintings, Lucas Cranach the Elder, Judith, and I attempted to recreate the dress seen in that painting, even though it's a biblical character, but Lucas Cranach the Elder really liked to paint fashionable ladies of the time. So this is a Saxon court dress, circa 1530. I did choose a different color for the dress, but then he has a series of these paintings, all of these court ladies posing as a one or another biblical character. So actually this dress appears in different variations. So mine is sort of a combination of several of them. Why am I showing this one in here? Because costumes actually can tell the story just by the way they are constructed. And what's interesting about this particular one in here, on the sleeves, you see there are these puff rolls, but you also see slashed velvet in there. Slashed velvet is when a fabric is like literally cut and then another one is pulled through. Why was it done? Well, history has it that it was done by a really wealthy people. Actually, I think it was a guy who did it first, because certain fabrics were very, very expensive, and it was just to show that they could afford more than one layer of the fabric. So they would do slash. Sometimes there is 2 or 3 fabrics showing like that. So this is usually an indication of a higher social status historically. And when we design costumes for Elder Scrolls Online, we take into consideration costume history a lot, whether it's medieval Europe or different other cultures, because we really try to tell visual story. And even though we make fantasy costumes, but I believe when costumes are actually sort of rooted in something that exists in real life, people have much more, emotional response to it, and they actually understand it a little bit better than something that has absolutely no connection to the reality whatsoever. So this here is one of the very first civilian clothing costumes that we've made. I actually made that one. This is a noble dress. And as you can see, there are some elements here that are similar to the dress that we were looking at just now. There are around the waist, there is the roll with the slashed fabric shown through. This is just a grayscale model before it was textured. So this is one of the cultural sets. Everybody probably knows by now that when we create costumes, there are some costumes that are just one-off, just for the coolness factor, like a treasure hunter or a tax inductor. But then there are so-called cultural costume sets where we actually think about, well, if I came, for example, if I'm visiting High Rock, like what are the people there, what is fashionable there, and what if I like to dress up as people live in that region, what would it look like? So usually these costumes are designed in a set of 3, where we actually try to cover the most common sort of types of clothing that people historically usually had in their wardrobe, meaning that tier 1 is your like everyday wear, you go around doing your business, whatever. Then tier 2 is kind of holiday or weekend wear, it's occasional clothing. And then tier 3, the most elaborate one, is ceremonial dress, something you would wear for a wedding or when you go to some kind of really special event, you would wear something like that. So this right here is a high-colored queen ball gown. This is a tier 3 costume. So what's of note in here, other than the layers and like a lot of fabric layered, we always try to do like layered look, even though yeah, it's digital, but I think it adds a lot of believability. And we also always like to think about the functionality of it, even the most elaborate costumes. What does functionality mean? How do you put it on and how do you take it off? Because so you will actually need to indicate, in this case, there is this lacing in front, because if these elements are not present, it's kind of like the costume always feels like it's unfinished. Plus, it's an opportunity to provide additional visual interest and accents on the costumes. All of the costumes in game are tintable by now, but they weren't for quite a while, not because we didn't want them to. They actually were tintable on our end pretty much from the beginning. There was just no mechanism to allow players to tint them. But so when we create these costumes, we actually would apply certain tints. When the costume is sold on the store, you buy it already pre-dyed to a certain color, and of course you can change it. But usually when we put out colors there, we actually put a lot of thought into what color to tint it to begin with. This particular one is purple and red. The reason for it being is that both of those dyes, both purple and red, used to be extremely expensive in Europe. So what it means is that this costume, this dress is actually upscale dress. It's very expensive. The reason the purple was actually so expensive and eventually reserved for just the royalty is because the dye that was called Tyrian purple, it was made in Phoenician city of Tyre, and it's made out of it's kind of gross, but of mucus glands of sea snails, and it takes about 250,000 of snails to make 1 ounce of that dye. That's why it was extremely expensive. And eventually Byzantine Empire actually adopted that color to be as their official color that like only officials could wear. And it was forbidden for the private citizens to wear that color. kind of similar story with red. Carmine red was made out of a small Mexican bug called cochineal that was brought from the New World in the 17th century. I believe Louis XIV was the first one who made it super fashionable. The heels of his shoes were actually colored red. And same thing, because it was an import product and the suppliers actually kept it a secret as to nobody knew if it's a seed or if it's a bug or like what is it, because they did not want people outside of the trade to know how they procure it, so nobody could, like poach on their trade. So carmine was also extremely expensive, and for example, a pound of red-colored wool cost more than an average citizen earned in a year. So when you see colors like this, there is a significance attached to them. This right here is also one of my favorite costumes. It's called a three-tane ceremonial dress. This is based on Bosmer culture. Color here is also important because, Bosmers are more of a they live in the forest, they're more in touch with the nature. They use natural materials, so the elaborate beadwork on the front part of the dress, you could clearly see where that idea came from. But also the colors of the initial colors of those beads are very natural. They're like amber, and we looked a lot at seeds, plant seeds that the beads sometimes are made of, and turquoise. So these are the colors on this particular dress. So now I would like to show you just the process that we go through when we create one of these costumes from the beginning to end. This particular one is the Desert Garden Gala Overdress. It's based on Redguard culture, and this is something a Redguard noblewoman would wear. So it all starts with the concept. See, here you see the finished concept. Before this, it gets to this stage, though, it's a series of rough sketches is made by a concept artist where, art director, associate art director, myself, and with the artist, we discuss which direction we want to go in with this particular, set, and what kind of things to keep in mind. Of course, the lore is very important. We actually check with the lore master all the time whether or not we're on the right track as far as the materials are concerned and the construction of the dress, if it's appropriate even for that culture to wear something like that. So an artist would get a whole bunch of just, thumbnail sketches, and then we look at them and we find those that, appeal to us and look more interesting. And then those are refined and very detailed line art is created. And after that, actually, I have one-on-one powwows, usually with the concept artist, where we discuss what kind of materials and decoration would go onto the particular costume. Whereas in here, it's a silk velvet that was referenced, and a lot of gold work embroidery. It's a very particular type of embroidery. And we actually referenced a lot of clothing from Turkey, medieval Turkey, Dagestan even, in general Middle East, to create this particular costume. So after the concept art is completely finished and detailed, as you see in here, we still look at it. We evaluate whether or not we can actually build it within our system, because there are certain limitations, and if necessary, we do sometimes adjustments to the design. After that, it actually, the next step is actually very interesting. If any of you make costumes or cosplay in real life, if you look to the right portion of the screen, what does it look like? It looks like the patterns that you use to make real clothing. So we are using a really amazing software named Marvelous Designer. I did not make up that name, that's what it's called. It's called Marvelous Designer. It really is marvelous because it works, it's a physics-based cloth simulation software, which is extremely fast. And in the screenshot, it is not included, but there is an actual, we would have an actual model of a character in there over which this clothing is draped. And only someone who actually understands cloth making can do this kind of work. We actually found out really fast that traditionally trained modelers have a little bit of a hard time doing this step, because it is a completely different way of thinking how to create something. You actually need to know the entire construction of which you need to think about, the darts and the hemming and, and the actual, like the shape of the patterning. So how do we do this? We have a very special person on our team who does just clothing simulations. I mean, she does other things as well. Her name is Kelly, she is a really dedicated cosplayer. She does tons of cosplay. I believe she's at Dragon Con right now. So as you see, there are some of the costumes that she makes. She's just amazing. So she is actually the one, when we get a complicated costume like this, it goes directly to her and she would simulate all of the patterns necessary for it. And from that point, it actually goes to an artist, to a figure artist who would do the rest of it. The rest means this. All sorts of minute detail are sculpted at this point. As you see, there is seams, stitching lines are applied. Here also we actually attempt to infuse a little bit of imperfections into the cloth and how it is stitched, because simulations always come out just, like perfect, but we want it to look as realistic as possible. So we actually deliberately sometimes make, like one side of the seam a little bit shorter, so that there is, like here on the sleeve, you see a little bit of buckling in the middle. That was deliberate, just to make sure that it looks kind of realistic. And so figure artists at this point would sculpt all of this incredible amount of detail. And once again, we discuss which materials we're going to reference. In here, I included just, for example, some of the pictures that usually I would provide for an artist, and we discuss how is it made. The top picture here is a antique Turkish purse that uses goldwork embroidery. There is some heishi beads on it, which artists actually insisted in making those as well. You could see them actually right here at the very bottom of the dress. I did not insist he makes that, he just wanted to. And then we referenced, as you see, silk velvet, that the blue fabric over there. And then there is a silk jacquard fabric for the actual underdress. And for the belt, and that's a bottom reference picture, this is a silver filigree. I actually, even because I have a few pieces of jewelry that are made in that technique that I brought with me from Russia. And I actually brought in a ring, and I sat it at his desk, and he was looking at it for a day just to figure out how it is constructed, all the coils and everything, so he could actually create the detail for the belt. And so this is the finished sculpture of the costume before it goes to texturing. You could see like all of the minute details are present in here already, all the trims, and we always think also of the type of fabric that is used, meaning even the weave of the fabric, how it flows, and crumpling actually as well, so that it does not look like it just came out of the dry cleaning, that it feels a little bit worn, or maybe it was stored somewhere and then you took it out of the trunk and then you put it on, so that it feels like it's real clothing that somebody actually owns and wears. After that, a low-resolution model is created and final texturing is done. And here you see this is already the model that went into game like this. In here, we also actually need to think about how to age the fabrics and trims, so that since this is a more of an upscale costume, it does not have a lot of aging, but it does have a little bit of it, so that it actually looks like it is realistic. Also, we always have to think about the kind of fibers it is made of, because since Tamriel is kind of an ancient world, our belief is that those are mostly naturally occurring fabrics, meaning, so we would reference something like linen and silk, wool, cotton, those type of fibers. And if it's leather, we actually always think about like, well, what animal is it made of? At the very least, is it land animal or aquatic? Because, sometimes we're like, oh, maybe it's like Gore leather or something, and we're trying to kind of like make sure that it actually reads as belonging to the certain animal. And that's about it as far as the process of it is concerned. And I would actually love to hear from you guys. What I would like to know is, suggestions for any kind of new costumes. We always try to make sure that we're making something that is exciting and interesting for the players. And definitely, please email Jessica with suggestions. Or if you have any questions for me about this presentation or about anything to do with costuming in Elder Scrolls Online, same thing, just email Jessica and she'll pass your questions along. I will take actual questions right now.
So I'm Jessica. For those of you who are going, who's Jessica? If you have feedback or ideas or anything else you'd like to share with Tatiana regarding costumes in ESO, you can post it on the forums, you can share it with us on social media, Twitter, Facebook, or you can email us at community@elderscrollsonline.com. I would be happy to pass that along to her. Even if you just have questions about creating cosplay costumes, I'm sure she'd love to provide some tips. So if anybody has any questions for her from our live audience, raise your hand.
I was curious, when we're looking at the wireframe diagram of the model of the, you had the three there, are those ever being made realistically as far as what you're talking about, you know, that there? That one? Are those being made?
I'm sorry, I think I...
That's right, realistically?
Something.
And then scanned, or is all of the work being done digitally?
Oh, no, all of this is done digitally.
Okay.
We're only thinking right now to start maybe scanning some of the samples of the clothing, but all of these are just sculpted by hand.
Does that include the texturing?
Yes.
Hi, I just have a question about the costumes when you design them for the characters. We know that the fabric has weight to them. Does it actually affect the character's movements?
Right now, we do not use any cloth physics in game, so what it does affect is how the finished model looks like, because in Marvelous Designer, you can actually change the presets of how heavy the fabric is or how thick it is, just so to change the way it drapes, to change the way how it just like feels, and if there are layers of clothing, obviously, clothing that's underneath will be squished some more. So while we're still working on it, especially when it's in a simulation software, yes, it does make a huge difference. With that in mind too, by the way, most of the time we do not simulate just on the nude avatar body, because real garments, they actually have a lot of construction that goes underneath. Like, so we have actually models where like, oh, you need to, I would come by to the artist, I'm like, well, you need to use shoulder pads on it. So they would bring a model that would bulk them up, or we have some that are called just lining, meaning we already simulated something that's fairly tight to the body, but it's kind of like, it's a garment over which we would simulate it again so that it doesn't look like it's just a wet t-shirt situation. Wet t-shirt situation.
Do we have some questions from chat? Okay.
Thank you. So first, this is from Twitch chat. Zuna Roth was just saying that she's a student, works with ZBrush and a lot of 3D printing, and she is very, very impressed with your work. And she wishes that she could sculpt just like you.
Well, just keep practicing. It's just, it's all it is. You just like, you don't think about like, oh, am I good enough? You just keep doing it and keep working on newer models. Do not work on a single model forever. Some people do, but like it does not let you advance. You have to just at some point cool it down and move to a new one. When you sculpt about maybe 100 models, you actually get decent results, yes.
And there was a question, they were wondering what culture was your favorite to design for?
What culture was
What culture was your favorite?
Oh, to design.
Yeah, in ESO.
Everybody who knows me knows that answer, of course. Khajiit, of course. We haven't, they are actually still being made, but there will be a Khajiit based costume lineup as well coming up soon.
Any other questions? Any more questions from our live audience for Tatiana? Okay. Do you have any more from chat?
I have more, sure.
Okay.
They were asking what software that you use.
Okay, within the studio, we're actually, Artists are not really restricted to just like, we don't insist that like, oh, you gotta use just this one. We have a variety of software, but the most standard ones are for modeling. It's Studio Max and Maya. And then for like, and obviously I mentioned Marvelous Designer for the clothing simulation. But after that, when we sculpt high detail, as you see in here, this is done in ZBrush. And then some people use Mudbox as well. And then the texturing software we use is called, oh God, I'm just blanking out. A substance painter.
Okay, I'll keep going. A lot of people are asking for Argonian themed dresses. Is that something that we would consider
Yes,
in the future?
this is something that might or might not show up very soon.
Oh, something else that's been kind of popping up is some sort of decoration on tails for Argonian or Khajiit.
Yes,
I know that's
this
a little
is,
more difficult.
yes, it has to do, there are certain, as I mentioned, when the design is finished, we evaluate it for whether or not we can make it within our system. I just have to tell you this much, this came up few times because, you know, I'm a Khajiit fan. I want tail pom-poms as much as anyone else. This is something that we're definitely considering at this time.
Do you also design the skins?
Yes.
They were just asking how you go about designing something like that. Since
Like,
it's
which,
a little more different.
do they have a question about particular skin? Because there are different types of skins and there are different types of items as far as our team is concerned.
Well, we're on a delay, so
Like a,
we'll see.
Like, do they mean like a zombie
soul-shriven
skin or
skin,
soul-shriven
or-
skin? So what is the actual question? How do we go about designing it? Well, the concept artists usually do drawings, but it's the same process actually as for clothing or for the armor or for anything else. First of all, like we need to know like what does it represent within the Tamriel universe, and you know like the lore master needs to get his opinion on the matter, whether or not it's something that can actually exist, and then we actually, discuss.
Oh, they were
the
just
ideas.
saying the Dramathra skin
Oh,
specifically.
like what about it? It's
I don't know. We have to wait another 30 seconds.
right.
Okay, we could probably
Well,
take another
this
question.
is something that was done specifically for a particular area and for the bosses there. And then, since it was so popular, we decided to convert it to something that the players can equip as well.
We could probably revisit what the clarification was if there's another question.
They're saying they want you to be a tailor in the game. Like you can go visit Tatiana in the game.
Yes!
Oh, well, maybe when I'm not bossing my team around, I could just do that.
Do you have a Facebook page or any sort of website where people can visit?
Yes, I do. And why don't I just give this information to Jessica?
Yeah,
But,
I can put it out on Twitter.
Yes, well, there is TatianaArt.com, but it's my professional website that hasn't been updated in about 5 years. So if you like to visit it, but I do have a Facebook page. It's more of a private page, but I've been asked many times if I can make something where I just post my costume work and stuff. So I probably will one of these days.
You can post it when it's made. All right, any last questions for Tatiana? Any from chat, Gina? Okay. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us. This was a really fun panel. Thank you, Tatiana, once again. We look forward to future costumes from your team. And thank you all for joining us live. That concludes our live streaming for a little bit. We're actually going to run another dungeon live with Classy Katie, one of our ESO live streamers, from 5 to 6. But before that, we're going to take a break and have our LFG hour here in room 3AB at PAX West. So if you're not with us, we'll be right back at 5 p.m. Pacific time. And if you're at PAX, come see us.
Good.
Bye.